Hi everyone, it's Claire Batkin from Your OT Tutor, here for another Your OT Tutor Connector Q&A session. Now, you'll see on the slide there, I don't normally share slides for a Q&A session. I pretty much just have a look at what questions people have dropped in the spreadsheet for me or have sent through during the last few weeks. But what I've been finding is that there's been lots of questions coming through just in direct messages and emails about applying for jobs, making sure you're in the right job. If you find a job that seems they'll be a good fit, how do you make a good impression at the interview? How can you prepare yourself for that? So what I wanted to do is, for those that are here live, I'm going to, at the end, I can answer any questions that you've got that aren't related to jobs as well. But for those that are here for this job Q&A session, I'm going to run you through a few of my tips. It's not a really detailed presentation. It's just I've dropped a few thoughts onto some slides for you to keep me from rambling on too much. And I wanted to just show you some other resources that are available for you as well. So first of all, one of the first questions is, how do I find the right job in the first place? What I would say, and most OT students are probably getting job offers, starting to look for jobs when they're in their third year, start of fourth year. So by the time they've graduated, they've probably already got something locked in. My advice would be, particularly if you're looking in the private sector space, don't feel that you have to. It's a bit of a volatile market at the moment. Lots of companies that are going along okay and fine, with lots of restructuring happening in both the NDIS and the aged care. Those companies may not be viable at all, or maybe operating in a different way to what they thought they might be when they first offer you a job 6 months in advance. So they may have a team around them. They may say, yeah, we can offer this sort of support, this sort of caseload, but 6 months' time, 12 months' time even, it could look very different. So don't feel like you actually have to sign up and lock into something early on. Even if you're getting that pressure from the company that we need a decision in the next week or you miss out, guarantee that if you applied to the same company 6 months later, once you graduated, if you were sure that they were the right job, particularly if they have some sort of new grad program, you're probably going to be able to get into that position. So just keep in mind that it's like you don't have to make decisions straight up. It's still very much a market where you can find a job. What is really bringing down a lot of new grads is that they're just signing up for any job, not really doing their research, not thinking about what is the best fit for them, and not choosing companies that are actually going to follow through with the promises that they're making. And to be honest, some are actually just chasing the big dollars. I've heard new grads on 120, 130K, which in my opinion is just ridiculous. I don't care how awesome you are. There's OTs that have been, OTs in management positions, awesome clinicians for decades that aren't on that amount of money. The only way that you could be on that amount of money is if you're not going to be supported. Your caseload is probably going to be huge. Your KPI expectations are going to be huge. So even if it sounds awesome and even if you think you're awesome and you're worth it, I haven't heard of any new grads on that amount of money straight up that are still working as OTs beyond first 6 months. It all falls apart. There you go. There's my little spiel at the start. But what I wanted to talk about is, okay, let's go to assume that you're going to find the right job. How do you actually go about doing the interview? So I do actually already have some resources about the choosing the right job bit first. So I'm not going to spend a lot more time, probably any more time really talking about that, because there's some in-depth webinars that you can watch already. So there's one called choosing the right OT job for me. It's not just for new grads and OT students, for any OT that's looking to change jobs. Basically going back to a 5-step process where you think about, what did I like about or not like about my placements or my jobs in the first place? Then you prioritize what is important to me. Is it having an OT team around me? Is it the location? Is it the type of work or clients that I'm seeing? Because you might be lucky and find a job that ticks every single box that you're looking for, but you may not. You may need to make some compromises, but you need to be really clear on what's important for you first. And then the other part of the everything you need to know when starting your OT career is a webinar that I ran with Dave Jereb, who's a PEDS OT based in New South Wales. And we just talked through what's normal for a new grad position, some of the challenges, some of the differences maybe between public health, private sector, just to sort of know that basically your new grad year probably will be a bit hard and probably should be a bit hard because there's lots to learn for most caseloads that new grads are going into. It's whether or not you have the right support to help you learn and get through that so that each month you're feeling like you know a little bit more, you're feeling a little bit more confident. Let me just show you, basically, if you're watching this, if you haven't already signed up to my free learning library, this is where you can find these webinars. I think the one I did with Dave's also on my YouTube channel as well. But basically, when you sign up to my free library, let me just see if you're seeing this. Yep, this is what you'll see. Basically, when you sign up for any of my courses, you'll come to this learning management system. Now, my members that are watching this as part of the Q&A, you can find those webinars in this section as well. But I'm thinking I may need to release this recording to some people that aren't part of the Connector membership. So what I'm going to do is also make sure that you know that they're in the Learning Library. So the Learning Library is the free one that's free for everybody. When you click into here, those two webinars I mentioned will be in the Empower Yourself section. So if we keep going down, it'll be in the webinars here. So you've got everything to know when starting your OT career is this one here, and choosing the right job for me. That will come with a workbook. If you click into the webinar itself, you can watch the webinar on this page here. And then here, if you're on a desktop, in the file section on the right, if you're on your phone, it's usually underneath the text part. You can download a PDF of the workbook just by clicking on it. Then it'll pop up as a download. As long as your downloads aren't blocked, this is what your workbook will look like. You can print it out, you can type into it. So you can see there's 5 steps that I just mentioned before. And that can be really helpful for just clarifying exactly what you're looking for. But that's enough for that. What I wanted to do was keep going with, let's say, more focus on the actual interview preparation. One final note, though, just about finding the right job. Don't feel that you only have to look where job ads are coming out, like in Seek. There's also Facebook groups such as OT Jobs Australia. There's a new version of that Facebook group. So if you're looking for that link, let me know and I can pass it on to you, where people actually advertise vacancies that they have, or you can actually say that you're seeking work for a particular type of work and people might approach you as well. Cold calling can actually work. So this means even if somebody's not advertising a job, it doesn't necessarily mean that they would never consider hiring you. So what you can do is do a bit of a search of your local area if there's any OT practices that you think I actually would really love to work somewhere like that. And you can just reach out to them and ask if they're hiring, considering hiring, those sorts of things. Definitely can work in the private sector. It can possibly even work for public jobs. So I know there might be some OTs that are desperate to get some sort of hospital or public health job. You may miss out on some of the new grad jobs, or you may be a student who graduates halfway through the year and the new grad jobs aren't there. You can reach out to some local OT departments and just see if they have a casual pool that you can apply to. Let them find out if there's any locum positions coming up. So while places like New South Wales Health, Queensland Health, they have very strict recruitment processes. It's not just up to the manager to decide, yeah, I can take someone on. Sometimes there can be flexibility and they can have internal lists, they can have short lists where they sort of bypass some of the advertisement process. Definitely worth just asking, find out if that's a possibility. If you're not looking public health, but you want hospital, even like private hospitals as well, they're probably not going to be quite as strict with having lots of governance around how people are recruited. There may be some more flexibility for managers. So definitely it's worth just reaching out via email or via a phone call and just ask a question. So once you've found the first job, one of the questions that came through to me was how can I stand out if I found a role that I'm really interested in, really keen? This would be my suggestion. So first of all, do your research into that company. First of all, to make sure it is as good as it sounds and sort of what's covered in those other webinars I mentioned. But if you do all that, it's yes, this is really awesome. You want to be able to show the company, if you do speak with them, if you do have an interview, that lots about the company, you know what their values are, you know what type of clients they see. So it's not just, oh, the ad looked really good or the salary looked really attractive, that's why I want to work there. That you can demonstrate to them that you feel that you would fit in with the company, that the opportunities for you to learn, grow, the clients that you would see is something that you're really interested in. It's more than just getting a job. There's something really behind the why you chose this company. What you can also do is to call them first if you're not sure or if it looks too good to be true, you can do this before applying, or you can do it before the interview stage, the very least. I remember I used to recruit for lots of positions in the public hospital system and also in the private sector. If you're somebody that reaches out and asks insightful questions, not just questions for the sake of questions where they could have found that on the website or it was already clearly stated in the job ad or something like that, something where it's insightful that shows, like what I was saying in that first point, that you're really keen to find out more about the company and the values and the vibe and all those sorts of things, then your name might stand out to that person. The person that's probably taking that call, they might have admin people, but hopefully they might be able to direct you to somebody that is recruiting for the position that would maybe eventually be on the interview panel. And if you can ask some really good questions at the start before you turn up for that interview, they'll be like, oh yeah, that's Jane. Jane called before and asked really great questions. Lovely to finally meet you. You're already standing out from the crowd from a bit of paper where they have no idea who this person is, what their personality is. definitely a phone call. Like emails can be helpful as well, but phone calls, like you get to hear people's personality. You also get to judge for yourself, is this the type of workplace that is as friendly or as awesome as it's sounding to be? So if you're thinking about, okay, what's a insightful question I could ask? It could be just, can you tell me more about the type of caseload that I'd be working with? What type of age group, diagnostic groups? What are some common assessments or treatments? You don't want to take up sort of 45 minutes of this person's time. Have some prepared questions so you can be quick, maybe even give a little bit of a warning up front that I've got a few questions that might take 5 or 10 minutes. Is that okay? You might have the other person is more than happy for a chat and it goes much longer than that. So always don't make these sort of phone calls when you only have 5 or 10 minutes, because you don't want to be the one that's then, oh, sorry, I've got to go. I've got to go into class. I've got to go to an appointment. Give yourself plenty of time in case you do find someone that's really keen for a chat, so you can make the most of that time and make a good impression as well. So yeah, ask about the caseload. You could ask about the team. So, like how many OTs? Are there any other multidisciplinary team members? Is there anyone at the junior level like me? How many seniors are there? Have people been there for a long time? Has there been lots of new people starting? So sometimes lots of new people starting means it's exciting, the team's growing. Sometimes it can mean that they've actually had lots of people leaving because it's not a great place to work. So don't just take it as, yeah, we've got lots of new starters. It's like we're growing, because sometimes that's actually not the case. And sometimes people may not want to say if they've had turnover of staff. So I wouldn't push that question, but just finding out more about the team is important. And ask them what type of person are they looking for. So one of the big reasons why OTs aren't happy in the job that they're in, it's not just the KPIs or the type of caseload. Sometimes it's just the team around them. It's just not a fit. They're a team that's either super fun and they're like social outside of work and they do all these other things, and you're like, you know what, a bit of a nana introvert. I actually just like staying at home. Don't want to feel the pressure to always come to these sorts of events, or I don't want to, maybe the type of workplace that sort of gets by with the challenges by joking about things and not taking things seriously, or the standard of work that they're doing is do what we can. Whereas you could be someone that's like, I'm probably going to get frustrated here because I want a company that really prioritizes excellence in their service provision. And you'll probably find that all companies will say that they do that when it's not necessarily the case, because there are lots of barriers in terms of being able to deliver services the way that we would ideally like to do it. But it's the attitude towards that which you can sometimes pick up on. So there's, some of the questions that you could ask if you do make a call. So the recap of that is try to reach out and call beforehand, but after you've done some research, so that you're not asking silly questions that you could have otherwise solved yourself. Those insightful questions could be about the caseload, the type of team, or who they're looking for that would fit in. And just make sure when you're making that call, don't just call the number and then start rattling off the questions. Ask if you could speak to somebody who would actually be, who's knows about the position, that's part of the recruitment process. And hopefully you'll be able to speak to someone directly, hopefully another OT, if that's the company that you're applying for. And make sure you give yourself plenty of time. So don't make the phone call 5 minutes before you are going somewhere thinking it'll only be a 5-minute chat. If it goes longer than that, you don't want to be the one ending the conversation early. And then finally, the last point there is attention to detail in your paperwork. So sometimes some popular positions, and this is particularly in public health, will get hundreds of applications. And sometimes the only way to really cull through that as a starting point is the attention to detail that you show in your paperwork. So if you've got typos all the way through it, if the formatting's a headache to read, if you actually have not changed the details on a cover letter and it's got some other company, like straight away, you're probably just going to be struck off the list. So make sure that you pay attention to detail. And if it is a role that you actually genuinely care about, you should show that investment, that you're showing that it's important to you, that you want to put your best foot forward to actually make a good impression. And probably actually one other thing on that attention to detail point is a lot of the work that OTs are doing will require attention to detail. So if you're not showing that you can actually demonstrate that applying for a job, what does it say about your clinical ability? What will it look like when you're working with clients, that attention to detail? So it's a way for you to demonstrate straight away what your capabilities could be. And with all the different AI and technology out there, there's not really any excuse for not having somebody check over your AI, check over your application, even if it is some sort of AI system or something rather than another person giving you an opinion. Okay, another question that came through was, what are some typical interview questions that I might get asked? And this can vary depending on, again, whether it's public health, hospital, private sector clinic. What I would say is that calling first does help. So if it's like we're recruiting for a general position, like a level 1, 2 or something like that in a hospital, or just a new grad position, so when I look at the company, they do peds, they do adults, they do mental health. They may actually have in their mind, okay, all our new grads start in the adult general community, or they all start in a peds clinic. But if that's not necessarily always included in some of the criteria or the job ad. But if you call first and ask that question about what sort of caseload is this likely to be, chances are they'll ask questions about that in the interview. So you can actually, while you might need to prepare for some other ones that they might throw in there, if you can prepare for what you think is coming, then that's going to be more helpful for you. If they have selection criteria that you need to address when you're applying for the job, so that definitely happens in public health, you can use that for inspiration. So it might be like, give us some examples of your assessment and treatment. The selection criteria will be more formal than that. It'll say, has high level assessment and treatment skills in an aged care caseload, or demonstrated ability to complete quality improvement projects, or to work effectively within a multidisciplinary team, something like that. So if they've actually got that as part of their selection criteria or sort of preferred criteria, chances are they could talk about some of those topics in the interview. So you'll probably put it together in your actual criteria if you're applying formally for some sort of job where they ask you to address criteria. If it's a maybe private sector where they don't ask you to do that, but they want a cover letter, you might put some examples there. They may pick out something that you've included in that paperwork and be like, oh, tell me more about this. Or they might have a specific scenario related to one of those topics. I think given that AI can help a lot of people answer any question these days, whether it's the truth or not, or whether they know it or not. I'm thinking that you could see some of the savvy companies not just asking a question that AI could answer that you could have practiced and rote learned. There may be some more, if you were in this scenario, what would you do? So you actually need to show that you can't rattle off something that AI has put together for you. So some of the topics that I've seen come up, particularly for new grads, could just be they often start with some sort of general, tell me about yourself, or what are your strengths and weaknesses? Being prepared for that question can be really helpful, and knowing that, it's coming and what should you put in there, focusing on your professional skills rather than what you do for hobbies and things like that. Sometimes they can start with that, particularly in the private sector. They may just want to know more about you as a person. So maybe have a list, if they did ask a really personal question about your hobbies and interests and things outside of being an OT, how much am I comfortable to share at this stage with these people that I don't really know? Is there anything that might put them off or that could come across the wrong way or something like that? Being honest, you don't have to share everything straight away. So if you prepare beforehand, you're less likely to just blurt something out and then regret it later. You can, in terms of the strengths and weaknesses, really what I would focus on, if you're talking about strengths that you can do, back it up with why you think you do it well. Either I've had great feedback from my supervisor, or I did this assessment or report and it achieved this outcome for a client, so I know that I'm doing well. But probably what I would say is that you follow that up with, but I know I can improve that skill even more, that there's still more to learn, or that I'll be able to transfer that skill to another setting one day and extend it even further, to show that you don't think you know it all as a new grad already, even if it's something that you are doing quite well and getting good feedback with as a student. Similar with the weaknesses, you don't need to just say, yeah, I'm terrible at documentation, I really struggle with that. Follow it up with, and what are you doing about that? So yes, I had some feedback. Like, my hardest part of my 4th year placement was doing some like the detailed NDIS reports, but they've identified some webinars that are helpful. They've really talked me through some strategies for what it is that's difficult for me. Like, I second guess myself. So I'm actually working on that now. I've got a bit of CPD lined up and very open to feedback from my supervisors to help me improve further. So basically show that, yeah, I've got this weakness, but here's what I'm doing about it, and I'm open to learning and improving. Think about also how you like to learn. So if you get a company that's actually asking you that, it's like, what's your preferred learning? So, like, do you like to be thrown in? Do you like to be given time to think? Have an answer for that, and don't try and make it the answer that you think they want to hear, because you're just setting yourself up for a bit of failure. So if they need someone that can take a caseload and run with it, and you're like, that's going to just tip me over the edge, I need like shadowing, I need to be able to see and ask questions, then you can say that to them, that I learn best when I've been able to see something, another OT do it before, when I'm able to chat through some things. And to be honest, that's probably what most new grads should be able to expect from an employer. It's just definitely not what is always delivered. So if you think that, oh, I'll get this job if I say I'm ready to fly, and I can take a caseload from like tomorrow and I'll be fine, just keep in mind that maybe you won't be. But if you've set yourself up to be that type of person, and they've said, yep, this is how we roll as well, it's a bit hard to go back and complain about it later on, or say that, oh, they're not looking after me, if they were really quite upfront with, this is how it's going to work. I always encourage companies not to try and offer new grad positions if that's how it needs to go to be feasible. But yeah, people make choices, and you need to just make sure that you are looking after yourself in terms of what's going to be sustainable for you. And like I said before, what's the best going to be best long term? Is it just chasing the dollars early? That sounds really good. It sounds exciting. I'll learn lots. Where chances are you could actually burn out a lot sooner versus taking something that's a bit safer, maybe looks a bit more boring on paper, not as high paying, but with really great support. You'll probably find that you'll learn lots more in that first 12 months and you'll be happier. So anyway, digress a little bit there. Go back to the interview questions. Other questions that might come up is like your organization and time management. So they might be like, if you've got 5 new referrals have come through and you're an inpatient acute OT, how do you prioritize them? So thinking about, okay, is it my prioritization checklist? Is it checking with the nursing unit manager about who's a priority for discharge? Is it working out a plan, then running it past my supervisor as well in case there's something that I've missed? Keeping to-do lists, having plan B if I go to see the patient and they're not there, that I can go and pivot and do this activity instead. Having that clear checklist means that I can do that easily. So having a bit of a plan of actual, not just vague buzzwords of I can use to-do lists and I can pivot and I can do this, like actually have some really clear specific examples. And if you've had to do that, or like manage your own caseload, or your supervisor was sick and you were towards the end of your 4th year placement and you had to carry her caseload, how did you manage that situation? And really give some specific examples. Working in a team, so yeah, that definitely will probably come up in the hospital type setting, and it could be like the next point there, conflict resolution, or it could, if someone disagrees with your reasoning, or if you need to negotiate who's going to see a client first, or what is just some of the strategies that you've used to work effectively in a team. So not necessarily addressing a conflict situation, but like what works well. So again, you could draw on your own experiences. And on the next slide, I'll talk a bit about how AI and things like that could maybe help generate some ideas for that. Conflict resolution, like I said, definitely could be in those team sort of settings. In the private sector, it may be more like, what if you get a support coordinator who's unhappy with the report that you produced or something like that? How are you going to go about doing that? Probably my tip would be, as a new grad, that you show that you would do your best to try and come up with a suitable plan, that you wouldn't promise to fix anything or do anything without probably checking with your supervisor first. So we don't want you to just say, oh yeah, just go check to my supervisor and let them handle it. Like, what would you do to show some initiative to try and manage the situation, or at least have a plan in your head? But before you take any action that's going to be potentially drastic, there's something that's come up, there's like, my supervisor really needs to know that. They'll want to know that you can actually flag it and that you'll reach out for help rather than digging yourself a bigger hole because you think, oh, am I going to get in trouble? And is this going to show that maybe I don't know everything? No, what we want to know is that you actually will try your best to come up with a plan. But when there's doubt or when there's a bit of risk involved, you will still reach out for support. And that could be, like I say, with some sort of team, professional colleague, or it could even be with a client type situation as well, in terms of that conflict resolution. So if you have a client who makes a complaint, what would you do? And sometimes even the first point is, what is the complaints policy of that workplace? Because they may actually have set procedure where the clinician doesn't address it at all, that it goes to the admin staff or the manager. There might be a form or a template or something that they do, or a process to follow. So that would probably be the starting point, is make sure you're aware of, if they do have any established processes, that you're checking in with your supervisor about what to do. And a part of that, any sort of complaint, is reflecting on, is there anything I could have done differently or better so that it doesn't happen again? I think if you look on my YouTube channel, possibly even the Learning Library, there's a short video that I did that talked about that, which could be helpful. Quality improvement, again, probably more so in the public health sector. And this is sometimes how they differentiate between candidates that seem pretty good similarly in terms of their clinical skills. And it might be like, okay, who's going to actually be that next level, really committed to excellence, committed to do a bit of extra work that's not just sort of day to day. So quality improvement could be just demonstrating that you know what the QI cycle is. And that, for those that aren't aware, quality improvement is where like you identify some sort of issue in the way systems are working. And then you're like, I could fix this, I could do this better. So we're doing this report documentation. It's really slow and inefficient. We could create this template and start doing it this way. And suddenly we're doing things much quicker. So think of actually talking about QI cycle in one of the Connector memberships coming up, possibly in August even. So it's coming up soon. So if you're watching this and you're a member, keep an eye out for that. If you're not a member and you think you'd like to learn more about that, another reason for you to join. And case studies. So we'll talk about case studies a little bit more on the next slides coming up. So I'll shift to those. Probably what I wanted to say first, though, is I've mentioned there that you could use AI to help. So some of those things, if you've got that generic list and you know a lot about the workplace, what you can do is actually ask AI, so ChatGPT, Claude, anything else that you've found that's helpful for you, Copilot even, basically ask it to generate some questions based on the position that you're applying for. And if you've made the phone call, you're going to have more details than sort of just in the job ad. And this topic, so it could be on a potential conflict resolution situation or working as part of a team or my time management, and ask it to generate some questions for you. And then you can have a go at answering those. When you're having a go at answering those, you could either brain dump your answers sort of into it like some dot points and ask AI for some help to how could I structure this. So some universities will teach like the STAR format or all these other different formats. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I know universities already cover a lot of that and you can do some research into that. It doesn't always fit for every type of answer that you'll be given either, but you could use AI to actually help you put it into a format that makes logical sense, that you can present clearly and succinctly. If they've given you some practice questions, you could actually not just type your answer or drop in dot points, but actually try answering it like by talking. And if you dictate that into a voice to text capture, and then you've got a transcript of whatever you've said, you could put that into something like ChatGPT and say, this is my answer to the question. Give me some feedback on how it could be improved. And just keep in mind that AI generally likes to be overly positive. So maybe start with that. And if you're like, yep, it was all positive, there's nothing I can take away from that, give it the extra prompt to actually ask for points that you could improve, that you want it to really be critical. So that could be a starting point there. Just want to quickly touch on case studies, because if a job isn't asking you a case study question, they probably don't have an OT on the interview panel, and I probably would be staying clear, because I think any sensible company that's employing an OT wants to show that they can actually do a solid OT process. They can show their reasoning behind, if I got a referral for this, how would I work out what to do? We'd want to see that you can do some sort of setting goals or a purpose, having that clear, that you can work out what sort of assessments might you do. You have a bit of an idea of what sort of treatments might work for this sort of caseload, and that you're showing, you don't just do the treatment, and that like there's some sort of evaluation or follow-up end process to it all. So I think if you're not getting asked questions like that, yeah, sometimes there's no OT on the panel to actually think about that. And then sometimes that can actually be a reflection in terms of what support am I actually going to be getting. If they don't care whether I can do a solid OT process, they just want to know how organized and efficient I am. Is that the vibe of the workplace? It's just going to be like, here's a referral, you deal with it. I would be hoping that, yeah, the companies that want to see what you're aware of and what you know and where the gaps may be would probably ask you some sort of case study. So one of the questions that did come through as well was, how can I talk, models and frameworks as part of interview questions? I would suggest that most hospital jobs, most private sector jobs probably aren't going to ask you can you apply this, the MOHO, can you apply the PEO to this sort of case and tell us through the elements? Be surprised if they did. I'm not going to say 100% they won't, but I think it would be rare. But what you can do is actually use these models and frameworks to help put together an answer for a case study. Because sometimes the case study questions, it could be quite detailed with lots of information. They actually give it to you in the waiting room 15 minutes before and say, have a read through this. At the end of the interview, this will be one of the questions we ask you. So you have a little bit of prep time. Sometimes we'll just ask you a bit of a more general, vague, you've been referred, Norma, who's 85, who's fallen and broken her hip. You'll be the OT seeing her for discharge planning. Run through what your assessment and treatment process might look like and how you would ensure a safe discharge. So something really general is like, hey, how do I even go about that? How do I present it in a logical order? And from the interview panels that I've sat in, sometimes I just, brain dump information as it comes into their brain. And it doesn't really come in a logical order. And then they probably walk out of the interview and like, I didn't actually talk about this really important thing. So probably what you could do is using something like either the Canadian Practice Process Framework. So if it's not, most universities I think will cover this. If it hasn't been something that you're really familiar with, there is some webinars in my Connector membership about this process. I think we've done the community process and we'll do a hospital process coming up soon as one of the later sessions. So depending on when you're watching this, there could already be something on demand for you. Basically, it's just a good way for you to think through, okay, if you've made that phone call, you know what sort of a typical client might be. Already they've told you what sort of assessments or treatments they might do in that setting. Straight away, you can anticipate they're probably going to ask me about a typical client that they see. What would that journey look like? And you can actually go through this process and be like, okay, once the referral's in, this is what I would do. These are some common assessments that we would normally do for someone that's broken their hip. And you might sort of just not just list random assessments, but maybe list, we would do an initial interview and we would probably also check in with her daughter to find out these sorts of things. We identify what is the minimum standard that the minimum level of function she needs to be able to go home safely. Or if you're in the private sector, a PEDS clinic or something, you say, yeah, I would do this assessment tool, add in the why, like why would you choose that one? And it could be like, because I know that's one that you actually use, but I've done some research about it and it would actually fit really well with this client as well because of this reason. So then you go through like the next step after the assessment, we'd set some goals, we'd work out a treatment plan. As part of that treatment plan, we'd always be checking, okay, is it working? And then we'd somehow work through to the discharge plan and what we would do for follow-up afterwards. Sometimes they might expect like a 5-minute answer to a case study. Probably don't want you to talk for 20 minutes on a case study. It's not a university assignment. So this could be another reason where AI could be helpful, where you come up with maybe, depending on how you think, you either brain dump it and then get it to reorder it, sort of the CPPF type framework to put it in order for you. And then you can practice that, not just practice reading, actually practice saying it without your notes, because that'll be more helpful when you're on the spot in the moment trying to remember everything. What I would do is once you're actually in that situation, they ask you a case study question, ask if you can take some notes or like at least pause before starting. So they might be like, yep, we're going to ask the case study question now, blah, 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 blah. You'd be like, is it okay if I just jot down a few notes before I start, just so try and keep it in a logical order for you? I don't think anyone that's half a decent company to work for is going to say no, answer now. Again, red flags if they're pushing you that way. They're like, no, that's okay. Yep, great strategy. Take your time, write a few notes. I wouldn't say take 10 minutes to write your notes, but pause for a minute, jot down a few points, even if it's just those CPPF steps. Like I'm going to talk about the referral, the assessment, treatment, this, and like a few dot points. Okay, so where I would start is, and like I said, explain the reasoning behind the why, not just I would do this assessment and then I would do this sort of treatment and then I would do this. It needs to be the why. I would choose this assessment tool because of this, and I'd probably prefer this one other than this assessment tool because then I'd probably do some sort of treatment using this strategy, but I would consider whether it's appropriate for this patient based on their resources, the funding, the time, the sessions they have available, all those sorts of things that you're not going to be able to outline every single treatment consideration, but just showing a few examples of the why, what you're suggesting you would do. And just the final point to raise is some general preparation for the interview. So actually on the day, like how do I feel prepared? Dress appropriately. So make sure the clothes actually match the formality of the workplace. In pretty much most cases for an OT job, it's like smart casual business attire. I wouldn't say men have to wear like a full bow tie or tie and suit or anything like that. But if it's a bit of a kids fun clinic or something, probably some neat jeans and closed-in shoes and a collared shirt or something is going to be completely fine. For females as well, just thinking, okay, what's professional attire? No really short skirts, no low-cut tops, no what's appropriate for an actual workplace. When you arrive, making sure you're polite to everyone in the process. So even if you're feeling a bit stressed, a little bit nervous, don't palm off at the admin person that's trying to warmly welcome you and you just go, yep, thanks, and only turn it on when the interviewer comes out. Show your true personality and hopefully that you're a nice, warm person, even if you're nervous right from the start. And even if you need to say, lovely to meet you. So I'm quite nervous. So sorry if I'm a little bit quiet. That's particularly not just be polite and don't be rude to even the people that are opening the door for you, the admin people that you think aren't the important ones. They're just as important. They're going to be part of your team as well. And you want to show that you show the same level of respect and behavior towards all team members, not just the ones you think are the important ones you need to impress. Allow twice as much time as you think you need to get there so you can park and calm yourself down. So if you're like, okay, Google Maps tells me it takes 20 minutes to get there at this time of day normally, I'd allow probably 40 minutes, an hour, even if you're not sure what you're going to do in terms of parking. Actually map out where you're going to park beforehand. If you've got time leading up to it and you're like, it's a bit of a tricky space, I'm going to go for a drive on the weekend and just check where are the parking spots. Yep, there's the front door. What do the signs say? So you actually got really clear, because the last thing you want to do is actually cutting it really close and feeling anxious because you're running late, you're stuck in traffic, or you get there, there's nowhere to park, I don't know what to do. If you know it's going to be tricky, maybe you work out that someone's going to drop you off and then that stress is gone. But if you can get there nice and early, that's not a stress. But also if you are someone that gets nervous, you've got a few minutes to just chill. Do whatever strategies help to calm you down. And then afterwards, probably after the actual interview itself, what I would say is even if you think it was a disaster, even if you're like, they're not going to call me back, I completely stuffed up that interview, while the interview questions are still fresh in your mind, and they probably are because you're probably kicking yourself because, oh, I should have said this, or oh, I forgot that. Write them down, because if you're going to apply for a similar job, like particularly in public health, I know that most of the jobs, the questions that we would ask in a job interview are going to be very similar for most sort of level 1, 2 entry level type jobs. So if you come out of an interview and okay, they ask a question like this, they ask this question. If you need to do another round of interviews or interview for another similar workplace, then you use those questions as your practice questions, because chances are you're going to get something similar again. So that's probably all I wanted to really touch on to start with. I'll stop sharing that. I don't think there was any other questions really that came through. Hopefully I've answered, for those that sent through some questions beforehand, I know I already sent some answers back to you. Definitely make sure you watch those webinars. Hopefully these will give you some extra tips as well. And like I say, the question that somebody asked in terms of like, how do I frame it? You know, is there the STAR framework? Does that work well? Using AI, I think, will be, it's there, so you may as well use it. Just making sure that you don't just take a generic AI answer to a particular question and learn it word for word. It's to do that test yourself at being able to answer questions, get it to generate a specific scenario that you then need to apply your answer to, and practice thinking on your feet. Don't just get it to generate some answers and learn them word for word. Sometimes it may work out and the company just asks you that, but the really good companies, and probably the ones that are going to be best for your learning long term, will ask a little bit more specifics in terms of scenarios, in terms of how you're actually applying all those different skills that you're going to be talking about. So hopefully that's helpful. If you are not a Connector member and you want to come to more of these Q&As, join up the membership and you'll be able to come to these once a month, plus all these other webinars that I've mentioned throughout. That's all part of the on-demand content, so you've got that available whenever you like. And if you are a Connector member and you're looking for something in particular, you're welcome to either drop it into the spreadsheet for the next Q&A or email me at any time. And if it can't wait till the Q&A, then we'll answer it directly via email for you or a quick phone call. All the best with the job search. Take your time, make some wise decisions, really prioritize where is this going to give me the best support. Don't think that you have to nail the first job choice or the first job that you're offered 6 months in advance, because what that looks like could change. But all the best, and I'll see you next time.